Okay, so today I'm going to read to you half of a baccalaureate address from the University of Boston by a man named William Fairfield Warren. And it was a book that I got from Forgotten Books. The name of it's called The Quest of the Perfect Religion. And I found it to be real interesting, a title, and so I went ahead and read it. It's like 16 pages long. Now, I'm not going to be able to read the whole thing to you because it would be over an hour. So what I did was I found a nice spot in it that I'm going to stop, and then we'll go from there. So pretty much this is just about listening to a story, because that's basically what this address is. It's a story throughout it. And then at the end, he addresses the people that are in the crowd that are graduates. And the way that this was all done, I was pretty impressed. The way that he was able to use the Oriental religion to show us God. So here we go. Another thing too is that I got this off of Forgotten Books, so that if you want to read the rest of it, I'm going to read it next week, God willing. But if you wanted to, it is on Forgotten Books, The Quest of the Perfect Religion. So what this is about now is going to be 5 questions to establish that. Okay, and what we're going to do tonight is go through the first 4 questions. And so this is in Forey Storm. So here, let me get started on it. A few evenings since, as I was walking up one of the main streets of Tokyo, I encountered an experience not soon to be forgotten. My companion, who was the American minister to the Mikado's court, was pointing out to me at a considerably distance at large hall called Maji Kyudo, and explaining that though now belonging to the government, it was originally built in a spirit of opposition to Christianity, to Christian missions, and was designed to be a kind of headquarters for all who wish to rehabilitate the old religions or in any way to oppose the spread of the Christian faith. While he was narrating some incidents connected with it, we came nearer and nearer, but soon found our further progress blocked by an altogether unprecedented crowd of people, evidently made up of the most diverse nationalities. It filled not only the approaches to the building, but also the whole street for some distance, in front and on either side. Upon inquiry, we learned that a convention of quite unusual interest was in progress, and that all these people, which the building could not contain, were waiting to learn what they could of the progress of the deliberations within. One man kindly showed us a copy of the call under which the assembly had been brought together. At its top, I read these words: World Convention for the Definition and Promulgation of a Perfect and Universal Religion. The provisions under which the delegates were to be appointed and the convention organized were carefully drawn and admirably adapted to secure a most weighty and representative of body. Nearly every religion and sect I had ever heard of, except the Christian, was named and provided for. Of course, I was at once intensely interested to see so rare a body, the first of its kind in the history of the world. But the crowd was so dense, I was almost in despair. Fortunately, in our extremity, 2 stout policemen recognized my companion, and knowing his ambassadorial character, undertook to make a way for us and to bring us into the hall. The struggle was long and severe, but at last our faithful guide succeeded in edging us into an overcrowded balcony to a standing place from which nearly the whole body of the delegates could be seen. Never can I forget that many hued and strangely clad assembly Nearly every delegation had some sacred banner or other symbol by which it might be distinguished. In the center of the hall was a yellow silken banner, the Chinese dragon. On the left, I saw a crescent of Islam. On the right, the streamers of the Grand Lama of Tibet. Not far away was the 7-story sacred umbrella of Brahma. And beyond it, the gaudy featherwork of a dusky delegation from Astanti. In one corner, I even thought I recognized the totem of one of our Indian tribes of Alaska. On the program, there were 5 questions, each evidently framed with a view to make its discussion and answer contribute toward the common goal, the definition of a perfect and universal religion. The first read as follows: can there be more than one perfect religion? The opening of the discussion of this had been assigned to the great Buddhist teacher from Ceylon. The second question to be opened by the Mohammedan was, what kind of an object of worship must a perfect religion represent? The third was assigned to the Taoist and was thus formulated: what must a perfect religion demand of and promise to the sincere worshiper? The fourth, assigned to a Hindu pundit, was the following: in what relation must the divine object and the human subject stand to each other in a perfect religion? The fifth and last question read, by what credentials shall a perfect religion, if ever found, be known? The honor and responsibility of opening this last and highest of the proposed discussions was reserved to the official head of the Shinto priesthood of Japan, the highest representative of the ancestral faith of the empire. As soon as my friend and I could get our bearings, we were pleased to find that only one of the questions had been discussed and acted upon by the convention before our arrival. We were told that the assembly had been opened by the president designated in the call, and that nothing on earth was ever more impressive than the 3 minutes of silent prayer, which followed the uplifting of the chairman's hand and eye. After this, there had been a brief address of welcome from the Committee of Arrangements, a few words of thanks from the president in response, and then a short opening address by the president, and the introduction of the distinguished Buddhist representative from Ceylon, who was to discuss the question, can there be no more than one perfect religion? To a Buddhist, there could be, of course, but one answer to this question, and that a negative. But he argued it, as our informants told us, with wonderful tact as well as power. He kept the qualification perfect so prominently before the hearers' minds that however accustomed any of them might be to think and say that there may be and are many good religions, none could fail to see that a perfect religions, there could be but one. He also was carefully abstained from identifying his own system with the perfect religion, and thus avoided the mistake of exciting the jealousy of rival religionists. So complete had been his success that after a short discussion in which several diverse speakers participated, a venerable Parsi had moved, and just before our arrival of the convention had unanimously adopted the following resolution: resolved that in the opinion of this world's convention, there can be but one perfect religion. While we were getting hold of these facts, we lost the president's introduction of the second pre-appointed speaker. We soon learned, however, that he was the senior Maulvi of the great Mohammedan University at Cairo, a school of Islam in which there are all the time about 10,000 students in preparation for the duties of the public religious teachers and chanters of prayers. His piercing eye and his snow white beard and vigorous frame would have made him anywhere a man of mark. Seated after his manner of teaching in the mosque upon a low bamboo frame, clad in his official robe, he looked like a resurrected Old Testament prophet, and Isaiah in living form before us. Okay, I forgot to tell you that this guy is a Methodist, just so you know, okay? At first, I wondered if he would be able to speak to so modern a question as the one assigned him. What kind of an object of worship must a perfect religion present? Time would fail me were I to attempt to report with any fullness of his rhythmic speech. It was Oriental through and through, quaint, poetic, full of apophthegms, proverbs, parables, but it conclusively answered the question. He made even the feather-decked Gru worshippers of Western Africa see that a God who knows much about his worshippers and can do great things for him is more perfect than a God who knows little and can do but little. Then, arguing up and up, he made it plain to every intelligence that a perfect religion necessarily demands a God possessing all knowledge and all power. It becomes a perfect religion only by presenting to the worshiper as the supreme object of obedience, love, and service, a perfect being. He showed also that perfection in an object of worship required that it be a living object, that it have intelligence, rational feelings, and purposes. In a word, that it possess real and complete personality. It must be possible to address him as a personality. He needs to be in every place, to be before all things, in all things, above all things. Limit him in any respect, and the religion you present becomes less than perfect. This was the thought stripped of all its weird and oriental adornments. But as he expanded and enforced it, his eye kindled and his chant-like speech rose and fell, until we hardly knew whether we were in the body or out of the body. So wondrous was the spell wherewith he had bound us. He was followed by an elegant representative of the Brahmo Somniacs, and he in turn by a Persian Baptist, both of whom argued in the same line with such effect that when a picturesquely turbaned representative of the religion of the sheiks gained the floor and moved that it be the sense of the convention that a perfect religion must present a perfect God. The whole vast assembly was found to be in a unit in affirming this grand declaration. Next, of course, came the third question. What must a perfect religion demand of the sincere worshiper? And what must it promise him? To open its discussion, the appointed Taoist teacher was politely introduced. As his noble form advanced quietly to the front of the platform in the costume of a Chinese mandarin of the highest rank, it was at once evident that the better side of Taoism was to be represented. The ideas of the Tao Te King and not the superstition and jugglery of modern popular Taoism. He began by saying that it seemed proper for him to start out from the point where the preceding discussion had stopped, the convention having already voted that there could be but one perfect religion, and this religion, in order to be perfect, must present a perfect object of worship. With both of these propositions, he said he was in full accord, provided only that it be constantly borne in mind that the whole discussion related to a purely abstract and hypothetical question. Now, said he, if a man really had a perfect object of worship, it is plain that his duty toward it would be very different from that he owes to any of those finite and limited and imperfect divinities which we and our fathers have been accustomed to worship. Our duties to these and their duties to us are more analogous to our duty to observe courtesy toward our fellow men and kindness toward those below us. The moment we picture to ourselves the perfect God, the maker, upholder, and governor of all things, Lord even of the celestial and terrestrial spirits, whom we are in habit of worshiping, that moment we see that moment of the worship of such a being would of necessity be something very different. As giver of all our powers and possibilities, he could justly demand that we employ them all for the accomplishment of the purpose for which he gave them. Indeed, were he a perfectly rational being, it would seem impossible that he should require less. On the other hand, such a being would of necessity possess both the power and the inclination to give to his sincere worshiper the perfect fruit of genuine piety. This can be nothing less than perfect virtue and even exquisite delight in virtue. In a perfect piety, all self-conflict, all internal resistance to goodwill, all self-will must be absolutely and totally eliminated. All fear, even of that perfect being, would have to be absent. Nay, it would have to be transmuted into eager, unintermittent love. On the other hand, how unutterably would a perfect worship, object of worship, love and bless a perfectly sincere worshiper. After many other touching words, particularly upon the woeful contrast between the ideal and the actual in life, and upon the arduousness of the struggle for virtue under every religion, he closed by submitting the following proposition for the further consideration of the convention. Resolved, that a perfect religion will have to demand a man a perfect surrender of will and life to a perfect object of worship, and will to promise him a perfect freedom and satisfaction in the life of goodness. A Sufi from Isfahan, a theosophist from Bombay, and various other speakers followed, all very nearly agreeing with the first, but some of them preferring a different wording of the resolution. Various amendments were proposed and discussed until at length the following substitute was offered. Resolved, that if a perfect religion were possible to imperfect men, it would require of the worshiper a perfect devotion to a perfect God, and would demand of the perfect God a perfect ultimate beautification of the worshiper. This was unanimously and even enthusiastically adopted. Question 4 was now in order. The president rose and said, "The fourth question reads as follows. In what relation must the divine object and the human subject stand to each other in a perfect religion?" The discussion of this question is to be opened by one who himself oftentimes been the recipient of divine worship and who represents an ancient and powerful priesthood believed by millions to be a real embodiment of one divine and eternal spirit. I have the honor to present to the convention the venerated head of all the sacred houses of the Brahmins in the holy city of Benares. Calm as his own imposing religion, yet keener than any who had preceded him, the Hindu addressed himself to his allotted task. For 20 minutes, he had every eye and commanded every mind. How shall I give you any conception of that captivating discourse? The following is but the barest thread to intimate the great truths touched upon by his master hand. He began by saying that some personal relationship between the worshiper and the worshipped was necessarily involved in the very idea of worship. In this act, the worshiper is thinking of the object of his worship. Otherwise, he is not worshiping. So the being worshipped is thinking of his worshiper. Otherwise, he is not receiving the worship. Here then is mutable, simultaneous thought. Each has a place in the consciousness of the other. To this extent, they possess a common consciousness. In this fellowship of mutual thought, they are mutually related. By it, they are vitally and personally connected. This connection may, of course, be of two kinds. If the God is angry with the worshiper, or the worshiper with his God, the relationship is one of hatred and antagonism. If, on the other hand, it is a relationship of mutual inclination, the man sincerely seeking to please his God and God sincerely seeking to bless his worshiper, it is, of course, a relationship of amity, of good fellowship, of mutual love. But all religions agree that the first of these relationships, that of enmity and estrangement, is abnormal, one which ought not to be. All religions aim to remove or transform such a relationship wherever it exists. It is therefore plain that the perfect religion, if there be one, must require and make the personal relationship between the worshiper and the worshipped a relation of mutual benevolence, a relation of mutual love. Nowhere can there be a perfect religion if the man do not sincerely love his God, and if the God do not sincerely love his worshiper. Here the speaker raised the most interesting question as to degree. To what extent ought this love go? There could be but one answer. In a perfect religion, the love of the worshiper for the worshipped must, of course, be the strongest possible, particularly as the worshipped is himself all perfect and hence all worthy of this love. So on the other hand, the love of the worshipped toward the worshiper ought to be the very strongest possible. What then is the strongest possible love which the divine can bear to the human and the human to the divine? I cannot enough regret that my limits compel me to suppress his discussion of this pregnant question. I can only say that from point to point, he carried the convictions of his vast audience until he had triumphantly demonstrated three far-reaching propositions. Number one, that the ever higher and more perfect devotion of a worshiper can never reach its supreme intensity until he is ready and even desirous to merge his very will and life. And in being in the will and life and being of all the perfect object of his worship. Number two, that the gracious disposition of the object worshiped toward the worshiper can never reach its supreme intensity until the worshiped being is ready and desirous to descend from the divine form and mode of being, and in an avatar of compassionate love, take on the form and the limitations of his human worshipers. Number three, that in a perfect religion, the human subject and the divine object must be set in such a relation that it shall be possible for God to become a partaker of human nature, and for man in some sense to become a partaker of the divine nature. Profound was the silence which followed this wonderful discourse. The first to break it was a professor in the Imperial University of Tokyo, a man who, though in European birth, was in complete sympathy with the purposes of the convention. After highly complimenting the Brahmin speaker, he said that he himself had long been an admiring student of India's sacred books. With the permission of the convention, he would like to recite a few lines from one of them, the Isha Upanishad, which seemed to him admirably to express the true relation subsisting between the worshiper soul and the infinite. He then gave the following: whatever exists within this universe is all to be regarded as enveloped by the great Lord as if wrapped in a vesture. There is only one only being who exists. A mood. I'm kind of getting emotional here, I'm sorry. I've read this is my fifth time. And actually, I've known about this Upanishad stuff. I didn't look at it. But it says here, and we continued reading, I guess this is supposed to be like some kind of a poem or thing out of the book. There is one only being who exists, unmoved yet moving swifter than the mind, who far outstrips the senses, though as gods they strive to reach him, who himself at rest transcends the fleetest flight of other beings, who like the air supports all vital action. He moves, yet moves not. He is far, yet near. He is within this universe. Whoever beholds all living creatures as in him and him, the universal spirit as in all, henceforth regards no creature with contempt. Now here, continued the professor, here we have the true concept admirably expressed. Because the universal spirit is in all things, even in the worshiper, and on the other hand, all things, even the worshiper, are in this universal spirit. It is more than possible, it is inevitable that the divine should have participancy in the human and the human in the divine. Few of the great religions of the world have failed to recognize in some way this basal truth. Even the shamans of the barbarous tribes claim to exercise divine powers only when personally possessed of divine spirits. In Tibet, the faithful see in the distinguished head of their hierarchy, the Dalai Lama, with whose presence we today are honored, a true divine incarnation. For ages here in Japan, the sacred person of the Mikado has been recognized as a god in human form. The founders of nearly all great religions and states have been held to be descendants or impersonations of the gods. In like manner, the apotheosis of dying emperors, Roman and others, show how natural is the faith that good and great men can take on the nature and the life divine. Ask India's hundreds of millions. They all affirm that every human being may aspire to ultimate and absolute identification with God. In his enlightenment, Sheikh Muni was far superior to any god. And this is not God, the God above. Now, if such are the conceptions of the actual religions, how certain is it that the ideal, the perfect religion must provide a recognition of them? I move you, Mr. President, that the propositions of our Brahmin order from Beniers be adopted as the voice of this convention. No speaker appearing in the negative, the motion was put and carried without dissent. What time is it? Okay, it's right at the halfway mark. Okay. Now, for some of you, that was way too Oriental. But hopefully that someday, we all can be more integral towards things. I told Dan the other day that I had read that the first temple of God was made by the Chinese, I believe. It was Oriental. It was Oriental. And they worshiped the one God during that time that temple was built. And it wasn't until later, during the time of Confucius, that philosophers came in and brought the idea of more than one God. And so, be it far from me to say that Orientals cannot have good reasoning and good judgment, such as what I read you here. How would they arrive at these understandings? It's through something called natural theology, which is the revealing of God through nature. And I hope that you're aware of that. God reveals himself through nature. It's his second book, so to speak. But it would be totally ignorant to say that God dumped every nation and did not look after them after the time of having quite a history with the nation of Israel. Be very ignorant to think that God just abandoned them completely. Especially when in the book of Acts, God is the God of the Jew and the Gentiles. The only reason that was expressed because they didn't know that. They didn't realize that God had his hand on all nations because they were his children. Is that true or false? When we think about things in life, and you think about, what is life? Life is God in us. And so any Oriental person who's alive has God in them. They don't have to have special divine revelation from God. We're fortunate to have that revelation. But this is just a story. This isn't real people that said this. Okay, this is a story in a presentation given to a graduating class. I'm halfway through it. We're about to get to the 5th question. Okay, and then the story actually takes quite a dramatic turn because the individual who's asked to answer this question doesn't have the answer. And so he has to go outside of himself, and we'll see it in the story. If you wanted to continue reading it, you can go to Forgotten Books and actually look up The Quest of the Perfect Religion, and you can continue to read the rest of the story there. But I'm not sure if how many pages are going to have green pages on them. You can do it for free, okay? But the green pages makes it so that you can't read it, okay? So the story takes quite a turn at the end, okay? And it goes in the direction that you're going to want it to go. What is the perfect religion? Of course, it's the Christian religion, okay? But for Orientals to discover that, how would that even be possible? Well, in this case, in the story, it will be from a sailor who's been around the world. And so, but the point of this is if I was in that class back in the 1800s is when that was done in Boston, and if I was a graduate, I'd be very happy to hear that presentation and to kick me off into the world, okay? Because one of the main points in it is this here. I'm just going to give you the kind of like the conclusion, but we'll read it again next week if you'd like. But what it ends up being is that he presents all these things because the Orientals have the lesser light, only the light of nature. And those people sitting in that graduating class possess the Bible and the higher light, the greater light. And so if these sages, these wise men of old of the Oriental, can command millions and millions and millions of followers with a lesser message, that the people that were listening to him or going out into their service, into the great convention of the entire world, that they should have a greater message for these people. And so that's how that's what this is about, okay? And I thought each of the questions were very interesting and the answers were overall very good, but it was rather spiked, okay? But anyway, I did want to read just some other things too. I was telling Dan about a book that I've been reading called The Words of Christ. And I bought the book actually, but first I'd read all of it but one chapter, the last chapter. I just got the book yesterday, but I had already read it because I had the SIM card, and it was, and Christy, you have it, and anyone, Dan, you have this book, The Words of Christ, and it's by a guy named John Bascom. And it's underneath the New Thought file, underneath the name of John Bascom, okay? And I was telling Dan about this last week, real quick, but I wanted to read you a section from this book. It's only like a page. And the words of Christ and how Christ spoke to his disciples. And this guy is incredible with what he says about all this. So I'd like to read this to you. It says this concerning Christ. His prevalent and peculiar method of instruction was parables. Evidently, this form had some difficulties. The truth so declared made an obscure impression on his disciples. Accustomed as they were to a diverse style of teaching, on one occasion his disciples said unto him, Lo, now speaketh thou plainly, and speaketh no proverb or parable. What was the reason of this method? The grand power of the parable is that it does not dogmatically deliver the truth, but must be interpreted in its inner significance by the mind to which it is addressed. He that has ears to hear, let him hear, says Christ. He spoke to them in parables because they were so slow to use their powers to see with their eyes and hear with their ears. I really love that. Those are our powers, our ears and our eyes. The parable is not the very truth. It only suggests it and cannot be taken as formal statement in place of it. It must be discussed, and that too spiritually. It is a shadow of a substance, the image of truth, of the truth, and the outline must be seen and the relation traced by each mind. The parable cannot be used without understanding it. The parable cannot be used without understanding it. It cannot degenerate into barren dogma, nor into conventional phraseology. Christ was willing somewhat to lock up the truth that men might be compelled to unlock it. Yet this concealment was, in fact, the most thorough possible disclosure. This instruction is of the same order with that which we find in the world. The truths of science are not statements, but things and events. No more rational appeal could possibly be made to the comprehending powers of his disciples than this of parables. They chafed under it simply because it demanded consideration on their part. It was no formal exhortation with which he gathered up the parable. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. And then it goes on. But I thought that was really interesting concerning parables. I was reading some book. I finished like 3 books. I don't know. It's crazy. I had a crazy week. It was like read 3 books this week. And anyway, one of them had in it a thing about, and I'm only going to just say this, by my memory, which isn't too good, but that when Christ said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, that statement can be really deep if you want to really dive into it. The Sabbath was made for man, for the benefit of man. The Sabbath was made for the benefit of man. Now I'm going to say something that should be profound. You may have never heard this, but you might have. I don't know. So it was made for the benefit of man. All laws of heaven and earth were made for the benefit of man. Okay? Out of the goodness of God. And so the laws, which are many, by the way, there's the law of truth, the law of love, the law of spirit. It's just endless. To me, I believe that there's a law for everything in the universe. Everything created has laws affixed to it. So there's all these laws. but they were all for the benefit of man, which points to the final goal of God, which I told Dan earlier on the phone. I believe that the final goal of God is the happiness of man. And all his laws are meant to accomplish that happiness. What time is it? Oh. Okay. One more thing I'd like to share with you if I can. I kind of screwed myself up. May not be able to share it. Okay, my computer's running now. Okay, so I'm reading a book called, no, I finished reading it actually. Okay, I have it up here, good. Okay, so I just finished reading a book called Natural Theology, and it's a book that I've been wanting to read for a long time. I wanted to read about it because I knew about it, I knew it existed, I'd seen it in other books, but I never really took a look at it. Well, it just happened to be that I had a copy of it on my SIM card. And it's written by a guy named Luther Lee. And if I had known his background, I probably would not have read it. But after I read his background, I read the book first, and so I really liked it. And it was simple. Natural theology is very simple because it's how any Oriental is going to know God through nature if they don't have scripture. And so anyway, there was a chapter in this book called Moral Government. Okay. And so it kind of opened me up a little bit more to some things. And I'm going to read you just a paragraph here. I could probably even read you a little more because it's kind of cool. But moral government is a government over mind. Okay. And so God's government is a moral government, and it's over our minds. Okay. That is where the kingdom of heaven exists, within your mind. God says that the kingdom of God is within us. Okay. And mind is actually not matter or material, it's spirit. Our minds are spirit. Okay. Just as our being is spirit, our soul is a combination of spirit and body, but I'm not completely sure about that. When you go back to Genesis, God breathed into man the breath of life, and then he became a man. But anyway, let me read this to you. This is pretty good here. A moral government is a government over mind, which possesses intelligence, moral sensibilities, and will, rendering the governed free in and responsible for his actions. Such a government is a government by motives which act not as gravitation in the rock, but which, while it moves the mind to act in a given way, leaves it free to act in that way or in some other direction. This fact will be more fully noticed under the subsequent division. Okay, I didn't really mean to read that part to you, but okay. That God is a moral governor is a necessary truth. Okay, my computer's kind of messed up. Anyway. Okay, but anyway, with this concept here is that God is a moral governor, and that he seeks to govern us in our mind. That's where he rules us, in our mind. But the thing that he doesn't do is he doesn't force our will to do anything. So it's a voluntary government. But there is a push of the spirit within us, more likely through conscious, that keeps us moving and learning and trying to understand things about God so that we can better ourselves, position ourselves to be more loving towards God and understanding of him. So, okay, does anyone want to say anything or anything about anything? It's quite fine. We've got a few minutes here.
Yeah, Tim, thank you for that. While you were reading the gentleman's book there, and all these different leaders of the different Oriental religions, it dawned on me as you're reading there, they're all the principles found in Christianity.
They were, yeah, because of reason.
Yes, right. So
right,
that's where they are, and it's really a shame that they've never caught a hold of it, So, but you praise the Lord. The mind is so key to everything.
Well, that's why, universal salvation is important, because it's going to cover them.
Yes.
It covers them. And even though it seems like they didn't have a relationship to God, to us, how do they function within a society with each other? And so they have a baseline of morals that they try to live by. Okay.
And that comes from the natural theology, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That does come from the natural theology.
And
now I have here
Tim, how does God does things with people that have a sick mind, like that are not right in their mind?
How does God do what with them?
How does he communicate with them or does things in their lives, because they're not, it's not always by their own doing. It's sometimes people are born, with being, what do you call it, disabled or something in their mind.
Retardation.
Yeah, with their mind, not with their body, but with their mind.
Well, he's going to deal with them justly and in all his goodness that he has. Okay.
But how would they know that?
How
would they know that? How would they get it or understand it?
They might not know that if they have insanity. So there's things that take you off into insanity, and that's, sin. It's a primary thing that takes you off into insanity. It's a form of insanity, is sin, because you're going against, your basis, your grounding belief in God. Okay, and against God and against man, basically. But there's no need to fret over, people's lack of knowledge or ignorance, because in the end, he's going to raise everyone. Okay.
Forgive them.
Yeah, it's like when he's at the cross, forgiving them for they know not what they do. You know what? That seems to me the easiest type of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay. And so God would have that superabundant grace towards them. Let me read another thing to you that's kind of cool. This is out of that same book, The Words of Christ. And again, you have this underneath. This is a book by John Bascom. And you guys have it. It's underneath the New Thought. And it's in that file that for those who have this file. But listen to this. When we speak of a thing as rational, we understand that it proves itself to our knowing powers in their normal action. It is intelligible to them. Reason, as we are now to use it, is an inclusive term for intellectual faculties. Okay, so your intellectual faculties, your thinking, your mind are done by reason. We have various means of knowing which gives us distinct results with changing degrees of certainty. These faculties, taken singly and conjointly, acting in their own fields and under their own laws, define the scope of our knowledge. Reason also includes feeling, so far as feeling aids the action of an intellectual power. The microscope embraces not merely the lenses that transmit the light, but the mirror also, which reflects the light on the object under consideration. Our powers of comprehension are in many ways dependent on our feelings, and to this degree, embrace them. So this is a real interesting start for this chapter, the rationality in the words of Christ. That's what this is from, the very first paragraph. And I know some people, you actually know him, I'm not going to say his name, but he thinks that reason is bad. And I don't know how he's gotten that far to want to say that. And this is not a stupid person, believe me. He's a teacher, very smart. But for some reason, he sees spiritual as, not spiritual. Okay. Your whole mind is spiritual. That intellectual faculty of mind that we have is rather complex, but it's wonderful. And it's been guiding us through our lives. Reasoning. We don't ever stop reasoning. You can't, just like you can't stop thinking. You reason over everything. And then your will gets to make the shot of decisions in life. So anyway, is there anything else? Anything else about the Oriental stuff?
Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah.
To get back to Rose for a minute, in the job I have, I call it a ministry. I deal with these folks that have intellectual disabilities. And the whole thing, me dealing with them, is through grace. There's certain things they want to do, but you can't let them do it. You know what I mean? Don't want them to get hurt or anything. And the same thing with God. He deals with those folks that were born that way, and I think that's what she was asking, with grace, okay? And he just brings them along. Someday, when they're with him, they'll have a full faculty of mind, and they'll be able to understand everything we understand, as we go closer to God. So that's what we see there. Yeah, these are good principles that you brought out here tonight. I'm glad you did this.
I looked up an old PowerPoint that I did with quotes on it, and it was a guy named Edwin Lakin. And actually, I have his book over here. I just pulled it out. But anyway, he went through a bunch of verses in the Bible that say that judgment is going to be on the earth and not after earth. Okay. And I find that to be really interesting. I believe that. I've been since I read it. Of course, it's been 10 years. Okay. But there's actual verses that actually say it point blank, that judgment is in the earth, and God's going to judge us in the earth. Okay. Sin is death is the final judgment.
Yes.
Okay. Why should he extend it any further than death? Because the wages of sin is death.
Mhm.
The death of Christ cleaned that up.
Yeah, that's right.
Amen.
Okay. The death of Christ cleaned that up. So I don't look forward to being embarrassed when I get to heaven by God himself to all the rest of humanity. I don't think he's going to do that. There's no need for it.
No.
Okay. We have a connection to the earth more than what we might think. And this is, after all, the earth is where we were introduced to God.
Yeah.
On this earth. Okay. And I know there's the thing about, love not the world, neither the things of the world. That's their immorality and other things. That's not the nature itself. The creation of God was perfect in every way.
Yeah.
Okay, because God is perfect.
Yeah.
And his creation is perfect. Okay. And we have been granted to be children of light right now, which is kind of neat. Okay. Sometimes people think that, I'm going to say this one last thing. Look at the time here. Sometimes people they think that the apostles were failures. they're far from failures. Far, far, far from failures. If you look in John chapter 17, he states in John, and it's very prayer to God. He's talking to God. And he says that my disciples did what I wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And they were faithful to me. And everything. I mean, just go and look at it. It's only probably 1 or 2 verses clumped together. But the thing is that they did what God wanted them to do. Okay. Even Peter walking on water. How far did he get? Not far, but he got somewhere. The guys in the boat, they wanted to go with him. They were too scared. Okay, because they were seamen. And they knew the dangers of the waters, you know, deep waters or whatever. So anyway. But anyway, that's just what I want to say about the apostles, because I think they get a bad name, and I don't think they should, because they're just representatives. Man, we've done the same thing as them anyway. And in all occasions, we wouldn't have vested them. Would we? I don't think so. Okay, so if you bear with me, next week we can do the other half of it. And it actually it goes in a different way. It goes in a way that we would want it to go. Okay. But even more than that, even though the way the story goes is fine, because the Christian religion is the perfect religion. Okay. As far as religion goes. Okay. So, but the thing is the address to the congregation that's sitting before him was really the important thing. And I think this can be really applicable to anyone, you know.
Well, praise the Lord. Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate that. It's eye-opening, gets you thinking, and that's what we're to do. As you say in this life, keep the mind active. That's our connection with God.
Yeah, we're getting really so many blessings out of these books that we read. And then when I go back to the Bible, it just jumps out at me like nobody's business.
Yes, right.
You know, and Romans 6, 7, and 8 are like, you know, favorite passages. And you know what? The more that you understand it, the more you like it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, you fall in love with them. That's for sure. All right. Well, God bless you all. Thanks for being with us. So we'll see.
Good night, everyone.
Okay. Good night, Tim. We'll see you all on Sunday morning.